Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in this afternoon for Judy Simpson. As we close out another week with the days continuing to get shorter and colder, you might think that the gardening season is over. Well, think again. There's still some things to accomplish in our gardens and landscapes, and today's guest can tell us a lot more. It's a pleasure to welcome back UVM horticulturist Leonard Perry. Thanks for coming in.
It is great to be back, Will.
Lot of tips. What have you been doing in your garden?
Oh, it's like the race. I'm on the home stretch right down to the wire. Any nice day, any day it's above freezing, I put on the layers and I go outside. But you know, the garden cleanup, getting ready for spring, putting the mowers away, storing the pots so they don't get wet and crack, all those clay pots. But again, cutting back the garden. I've got a lot of perennial beds. Normally I recommend leaving those until spring. It's good for the wildlife, but we've got a lot of fields around. They've got plenty of seeds and habitat. I'm very busy in the spring, so I like to do my cutting back now.
Well, speaking of cutting back, I told you that that's some of what I've been doing. I've been working, trying to get some invasives like buckthorn and honeysuckle out. And in doing so, I came across something that I took a picture of, and you have subsequently told me that I got a picture of what's called common barberry. It's an invasive, just like buckthorn and honeysuckle, that I've been trying to get rid of, and I left this thinking, oh, it's beautiful, but the reality is it is an invasive.
That's why a lot of people planted it before we knew better, and it's all through landscapes. Beautiful this time of year, has nice fall foliage that falls off, but then they have these red berries on, which are beautiful, but the birds eat them and they spread them around, and this displaces a lot of native plants, so it's on the big time most unwanted plants in the garden, invasives.
And as a follow-up, I brought in a specimen because what I'm wanting to point out, in addition to these berries here, you can see these really, really sharp thorns, Leonard, and I guess that's one of the characteristics of common barberry.
Yeah, and that's what's made it a nice hedge, because you don't want any, people or pets to go through this, or animals. That'll keep them out, a dense hedge with those thorns. But on the other hand, like you said, pruning that out, I hope you have some nice long rose gloves, those thick ones. I learned the hard way, my friend. Yeah, so get some of those, or those clippers that have the long handle you can reach in. But yeah, get it out. There's some nice alternatives. One of my favorite is the winterberry. I've got a whole article on my website. We'll give it the end, just on alternatives to the barberry.
All right. Now, you've been busy since our discussion last month. I understood you took a trip to Iceland, and as part of that, you saw, I guess we'd call it Icelandic horticulture.
Did, Will. It's amazing. You think about Iceland, this island in the middle of Atlantic. It's up touching the Arctic Circle, so pretty far north. They do get a lot of winter weather, but being in the ocean, it's more moderate even than Vermont. So that's fascinating. It's a volcanic island. There's still active volcanoes, and they produce these lava fields. When you land in Keflavik down in the southwest and take the 40-minute ride to the capital of Reykjavik, this is what you go through, lava fields, which is just interesting to see in itself. But I had no idea they had these 2,000-3,000 foot mountains. This is right across from the downtown of the capital city. You see these mountains that just rise up with snow on top. Fascinating. And right in that same area is what's called the Golden Circle, which is three main sites. One is this national park, Thingvellir, and the interesting thing here is this you're looking at is the edge of North America. It's one of two places in the world where the continents' tectonic plates come together. This is what's called a rift valley, and right across that is the edge of Europe. So, and there are places you can actually walk between the continents. Fascinating to have that there. A lot of geologic activity, as you might imagine, with the volcanoes. This is a geyser, spelled as they do. That in the background, it doesn't erupt very often. They have some that do erupt every 5 minutes there, but that is the original geyser. That's where we get our word geyser from, is that one thing there. So you figure, and we'll come back to this, all this hot water coming up that's basically boiling. A lot of waterfalls you see there. This is kind of like their version of Niagara, but there's many of those. And again, one of the three big sites.
Now, the temperature of that water, roughly, if we just go back for one sec.
That coming up, it's almost boiling.
Okay.
And it's funny, they have a sign there that says, don't touch that water because the nearest hospital is 50 miles away. So
breathtaking, but has
But yeah,
its
they have a
respect.
fence, a little thing there. You stay behind that. You don't put your foot in. But this is not. This is, of course, very cold water here in this waterfall. But just beautiful things to see. Of course, there's glaciers and all. But this was one of the sites too on our tour down in that southwest part. Geothermal is huge there. They in fact use it to make power, so the power is pretty cheap, and they use it to heat. 85% of the homes in Iceland are heated by basically free hot water. Comes out of the ground, almost boiling, and that's what's heating this year-round hydroponic greenhouse tomato production. A fifth of the tomatoes in Iceland each year are produced in these several acres of greenhouses. They're lit during the day. Again, that cheap geothermal power to make these tomatoes grow. They harvest almost a ton of tomatoes a week out of here. And here you see some tomatoes forming. And agritourism is big. Tourism in general in Iceland is huge now. It's overtaken fisheries. And this tomato operation, you can come in. It was a cold, raw day, windy. We came in, nice warm greenhouse, and they have a cafe. And you sit there and you eat this fresh tomato soup made from their tomatoes. You cut up basil they have grown and put there and eat their homemade bread. So, I mean, a wonderful example of agritourism at its best in Iceland, of all places.
I can't help but thinking the commonality: Vermont, Iceland, agritourism; Vermont, Iceland, cold.
Yeah, but the difference is that geothermal, which makes all that possible. We couldn't afford to heat the houses here, but it was just fascinating. Cucumbers, lettuce, they have year-round. You wouldn't think about that in Iceland.
Just generating the economy and all this great local food.
Yeah.
Very
cool.
cool.
Other aspects of agritourism maybe we'll touch on in future shows.
Yeah. Now, back here in Vermont, you've brought a few things to talk about, including some indoor plants, some potted bulbs, so
let's start with
take
the
it
bulbs
away.
Here. Yeah.
Let me get my thorny friend here out of the way.
I don't want to run into that. But if you have some leftover daffodils, or as I did, go to the store and get some into the season, close out. These are some miniature daffodils, narcissus. There's a picture they're called minnow. There's some others that are tete-a-tete. It's a nice one too that's small. Put 4 in a small pot. This, again, decorating pots. This is one my daughter did many years ago for Mom, and so a good kids activity, either decorating and planting these. I left it to show, put a little more soil in. You want these just below the soil surface or touching.
Just a little
That's
bit
great.
so we can see what
a little
you've
more
done.
soil, but I put 4 of these small bulbs in this pot and put them a lot tighter than you would outside.
Yeah.
Water it, but these need, most bulbs to bloom in force and to bloom in the wintertime need about 10 to 12 weeks of cold being about 40 degrees, something like that. The example is the paper white narcissus that you see in bloom for Christmas. You can buy those now. That doesn't need the cold.
Okay, so let's see the difference. You have a picture of that,
I have a picture
I think,
of the paper white narcissus that there it is, and it's very fragrant. Some people, like my wife, don't like the fragrance, so we didn't plant that. I went with the yellow daffodils instead. But again, that's a great traditional Christmas plant. And then another one I brought a picture of is amaryllis. A lot of people know that, but there is the picture. You see it for Christmas, and actually brought a bulb. And what I've done is bought this bulb at a local store. You can get them now, and they're huge. And so you want a big pot because they get big and tall, but they like to be kind of pot bound. So you want a pot. This kind of goes down there. That's about 1 inch on either side of that bulb. Okay. About 1/3 of the bulb above the soil, just regular potting soil. Water it, and then it starts growing. It takes about 6 weeks, so this won't be in bloom for Christmas, but give it to the mother-in-law. She can watch it come into, leaf and then flower. So for winter time, that would be good. You can get them already started. You can get kits, but amaryllis is a great holiday gift or gift for winter.
Especially as you pointed out, they both are. The paper white as well, but the amaryllis is not going to be quite as intolerant to some folks in terms of the aroma.
And this you can keep going from year to year. The other one you can probably plant out in the garden of forced bulbs.
Okay. Let's see. You've got at least one more here.
Well, we've got a plant here that's this time of year, Thanksgiving cactus, some people may have in flower. And I was thinking about getting one in flower, but I said, no, I'll just bring this and show what can go wrong. Now, 3 things I've done wrong with this, hate to say, but it's got reddish leaves, for one thing, and it really should be more green. That's from too much sun. This was in a south window. Just had it hanging there, wasn't thinking about it. It also is hanging up high. It gets a lot more heat this time of year. Tends to dry out more. I tend to underwater rather than over water. This, unlike most cactus, needs a bit more water, so it didn't get enough water, got too much light, and didn't get the right light conditions to have flowers. So this probably won't have flowers unless I change it. And here's an example of what it should have now, and the ones you buy in the stores. But to get these flowers, you need either about 6 weeks, 50 to 60 degrees, and that's where I'm going to put this after, or you need about 14 hours of total darkness for about 6 weeks. So, and I can't.
Is it too late for this guy? In other words, I think
too late for now. If I put this in the cool, which I'm going to do, a little bit less light, hopefully it'll green back up. I'm thinking maybe for Valentine's Day. So, but at least I'm going to try that, or wait a little bit and maybe can make it bloom for Easter. So
too late for the upcoming holidays, but the plant itself.
Plant itself is fine. These will grow for years. So.
Okay. Now I know next up something that is in a lot of homes. This little guy right here.
That because that was looking so good. I just wanted to mention it is a very popular house plant, and it comes in many colors. Really pretty easy. One of the things you want warmth. You don't want to overwater it. You want indirect light. That's one of the keys there too. North windows where this one's been. And again, just make sure if you water it and it drains to the bottom, that it doesn't sit in that water. And so those are some of the really keys, and somewhat warm. It really doesn't want below 50, but 65, 75 is ideal. So those are the keys to have a beautiful African violet. Again, very common plant in homes, and pretty easy too. You do want to make sure though the leaves break off very easily, but you do that, you stick it in some soil and you can even root them perhaps. So
let me just back up to the first tip that you had as a bullet point, the do not overwater. That's a relative piece. Maybe talk a little bit about a test of a finger. What do you mean when you say do not overwater?
Don't water. In other words, best to run things a little bit on the dry side. You can do the finger test, but the water should drain out, but then let it empty the saucer out and then let it get kind of dry to the touch. There are moisture meters. If you're not sure, you can try those too. Okay. This doesn't really wilt like some house plants do. Peace lily is a good example. That's my indicator plant. It starts wilting. I know things start to need watering. Okay. So.
Well, we've touched on a few things from indoors. Also time to pay attention, as you did in Iceland, to nature on the outside.
Right. So brought a couple examples here. Birds, that's one of the things we really attract and feed through the winter. But of course we don't really want to feed the squirrels. So I have these on our posts. We have the feeders hanging from posts or on a pole. And this is great. Squirrel baffle, there are various versions of this, but it basically put a clamp on the pole and put this over it. The clamp holds it, and you put this around the pole, and it just snaps shut like that. So very easy to install, and it's so funny to watch a squirrel then shoot up that post. I don't know how they do it, slick post, but then they're up there, you just see a tail out, and they can't figure out, okay, how do I get around this? And then they go to the next shrub or the tree, and they're looking like, okay, can I make that? Can I jump it? And they just can't figure it out. So that's a really cool thing.
A couple of other bird-related pieces.
And then the bird things are feeders. There's just a lot of different types of those. One of the things we started with and still like is these mesh feeders. We use black oil sunflower seed. We have so many birds now, we use bigger ones. And then they're, for those that like to eat those, some like the mourning doves, cardinals like to feed on the ground or a platform, so you can hang these. We have it mounted on a post. And then there are birds that like to perch, especially the bigger birds. Yeah. Make sure if you want them, you get a wide enough perch for them. So different types of feeders.
So if folks looking for other garden landscape tips that we didn't touch on today, there's always your website.
There is Perry's Perennial pages, perrysperennials.info. I've got more on all these topics, articles on those, as well as some of the, where I put the upcoming tours we have this coming year. And there's a site on there people can go to watch for those and actually send me their email address, and I'll put them on the list.
That's what I just wanted to follow up. If somebody wants to get on that list, All they've got to do is go to the website, find your email, and just touch base with you.
Exactly, and just say, put me on your tour list, and we'll let you know for upcoming tours when they're. And they've got 4 in the works for this coming year, really exciting ones.
In addition to pointing out Leonard's website, before we go, we want to point out that if you have questions related to gardening, pests, other problems, use the UVM Extension Master Gardener Helpline, the website on your screen, or even easier, use the toll-free number 800-639-2230. Leonard, just great to have you in. The trip to Iceland, resolving my barberry questions, seeing some of the feeders and some of the indoor plants. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
That is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit Across the Fence.